the radical fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron and Nikos Show, or Dialogue, our regular program on Sundays. I apologize for not having a show in a while, but circumstances were beyond my control. So here we are, the show we intended to do 2 weeks ago. But before we get to Curtis Yarvin, which is an interesting and yet depressing topic, I wanted to ask Nikos about his real, true area of expertise. And that is the World Cup. So how are you enjoying the Cup so far?
I'm not enjoying it because I'm so much invested in Messi winning again that I can't enjoy it. I told myself he won in 2022. This time I'm going to be relaxed. But no, what I'm enjoying is finally you people in the US appreciating the sport, started calling it football. And I think there's a good chance the US can be in the quarterfinals.
Who are they playing? They're playing Belgium.
They're playing Belgium, which is not the Belgium that it used to be. It's past its golden generation. So I think the game starts from maybe not 50-50, but at maximum 52-48 for Belgium. So it's a good chance for the United States.
Yep, they really do have a chance to make it. Any thoughts about today's games? We've got Brazil playing, and we've got England playing Mexico in Mexico City with the altitude and all of that.
This is not to be missed. So my plan is we're gonna finish 11 o'clock local time. I'm watching Brazil, Norway. I go to sleep for 2 hours, then I watch England, and then I sleep again.
So predictions.
That's been my life in the last days. Self-inflicted sleep deprivedness, but it's worth it.
Predictions.
I won't bet against Brazil, and I think England is the better team. England will eventually win.
So we will have Brazil, England in the quarterfinal. That'll be a great game. That'll be really interesting.
That will be really interesting. I hope the other teams go through because, again, I'm keeping an eye on who Argentina will meet in the semifinals, and I want it to be, I don't know, a weaker team.
I want it to be Brazil. I think Argentina, Brazil, France, Spain, those are the two semifinals that should happen. And whoever comes through on that one, I'm going to be happy. So, except for France. I hate France, but they are probably the best team in the tournament. But they're French, so I hate France.
In the tournament is an understatement. I think we like to be nostalgic about the past. I think this French team is one of the at least 3 best teams I've ever seen in my life. And to be honest, I cannot think which the other 2 would be. Till now, it's the scariest team if you're an opponent. The 4 guys they have up front, they're scary.
Yep. So it's been a fun World Cup so far. That Argentinian game against Capo Verde, which you probably were distressed over, was a fun game. I mean, that was and Capo Verde, give them the credit. They played a good game.
They played a very good game, yes. But to be honest, I was never very much worried because the gravitas of Argentina and the gravitas of Messi at that stage, it was an ideal game. Good applaud for Cabo Verde. Argentina goes to the next round.
Agree. That was good. All right. Let's get to our topic. I think in spite of your belief that Americans are starting to like football, I think the audience here is getting antsy. They don't like it that much. All right. So Curtis Yarvin, I mean, I'd say since really the 2016 election, Yarvin came out of nowhere for many people. Certainly for me, I'd never heard of him before that, and then seemed to be everywhere on the intellectual right front. The Claremont Institute, him and what's his name, Bronze Age perverts. They were the 2 people who kind of arose out of that election, and it seems like Curtis Yarvin has had a longer life like more of a shelf life than Bonjay's proved kind of burnt out, I think, much faster.
Going backwards and forwards, longer life.
Yeah, but started at the Claremont Institute, which was, Claremont Institute is an interesting place. It's a bastion of old line conservatism, founded by one of the big advocates for the Declaration of Independence and the American system of government. And with the 2016, with Obama presidency and then the 2016 election, completely shifted and moved away from that. And Bonj, Age Purvitz, and then Curtis Yarvin became huge heroes to these academic conservatives that you really wouldn't expect it, right? And then in Silicon Valley, we started seeing Curtis Yarvin being mentioned by people like Mark Andreessen, maybe that's more recently, and among young, I think, entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, particularly over the last few years, Curtis Yarvin's name is everywhere. And then recently, he's just got a lot of visibility in the mainstream media. There's a New Yorker profile. I think there was an interview with the New York Times, but a big profile in the New Yorker, interview in the New York Times, huge profile. So he's an interesting character. And part of what's interesting, as I think we'll get to, is why he's so influential, because I think that's an important question. What is it about him that has increased? But he's clearly influential on the intellectuals who then are helping shape the new right and maybe shape MAGA. I don't think many of the MAGA day-to-day people know who he is, but whether they know who he is or not, they're being influenced by him through the mechanism of other intellectuals. So let's start at the beginning. So here's a real crucial character that I think we can learn. It's important that we learn about because he has a huge influence on the right, and potentially has growing influence, particularly if J.D. Vance, I think, follows him. So J.D. Vance is quite close, and he has the potential to have even more influence in the future. Important for us to know who he is and what he's about, and why he's been so successful. I mean, that always is interesting. Yeah, Nikos.
Yes, first of all, I think the attention he's getting is warranted, so he deserves it intellectually, because he does something that no one else in the right, or these days even in the left, does. He provides a theory of regime change. He provides a theory of, let's say, a right-wing counter-revolution, because he doesn't like the term revolution. He sees himself as a reactionary. But he's doing two things, and this is going to be a short introduction, and then we're going to say who he is. So for people who understand what is his audience looking forward to. So he's trying to answer two important questions. Number one, where does power reside in the modern state? So you can think of him a bit like the Foucault of the new right, the Michel Foucault of the new right. He's the theorist of power. Where does power lie? Because his answer is, it's not where most of you think.
Yep.
And the second question he's asking is, how do we go from one type of government, one type of regime actually, one type of polity, to another type of regime? So that's why I call it the theory of revolution.
And he has an idea of what an ideal regime looks like.
Exactly.
And what kind of regime we should have.
Exactly. He also has a desired end state, a desired telos, to use the Greek word, a desired goal. And this goal is a type of monarchy. He calls it an accountable monarchy. We can use different ways. But his work in a nutshell is this. This regime deserves to fall. This regime is driving us to hell. In which case we need to think out of the box and do everything within the means of a civilized society, everything before getting the machetes to stop that regime. So this is who he is in a nutshell. In terms of the biography, he used to be in Silicon Valley. He used to be, I think, a software engineer. He used to blog in the late 2000s as Mencius Moldbug. That's how I met him. I didn't know him as Curtis Yarvin. I knew him as Mencius Moldbug.
I think until the mid-20 teens, he was Moldbug.
Yes, he was Mencius Moldbug. Then he started writing with his real name. His intellectual ancestry used to be he was a libertarian in a previous phase,
You can tell.
influenced by Hoppe. He's never mentioned Ayn Rand as far as I'm concerned. And I think at some point, I think I had consumed each one of his podcasts and writings. I never saw him mention Ayn Rand. So mostly influenced by the Austro-libertarians and maybe his appreciation for monarchy maybe has something to do also with Hans Hermann Hoppe's infamous theory that the monarchy is more accountable not accountable, but more responsible not to completely ruin a country because there is something at stake there for the monarch. So this is his trajectory. These days he's only doing intellectual work. He's not anymore in software. So if you want demeaningly, you could say he's a blogger, but I think he's a political theorist because the questions he asks are important questions of political theory. Whether we like the answers or not, we're going to get to that in a second.
Yeah, and I think even his monarchy is interesting, right? It's not a pure monarch. It's kind of a corporate CEO, and a lot of it he frames in terms of kind of libertarian incentive structures around the corporate CEO. So I think that's his appeal to Silicon Valley is hey, you guys, you smart guys, you startup guys, you can run the country, right? You could be the monarchs. It's not hereditary. It's more based on ability.
And there's something also, one more thing in the whole monarchy thing before we get into details. One of our viewers will say, this sounds a bit aristocratic and a bit elitist. And Yarvin would say, yes, proudly, he would, as he often says, most people do not think for themselves, should not think for themselves, and should not be expected to think for themselves. So the example he uses, I don't remember if it's from Mussolini or Nietzsche or Hitler or all of them. He says something like, the masses are like women. They are waiting to be led. They want to be led. And actually you are doing them a favor if you lead them. So the best thing to do is for a political figure, like a Caesar figure, a strongman figure, to actually lead, because the masses cannot think of themselves and they have to be led.
Yeah, and like much of the new right, he's very anti-egalitarian and he's very pro-hierarchy. So, he believes in leaders. He believes in leading others. He believes there are better people and worse people. So he's definitely, his critique of egalitarianism, I think, it has elements of truth, but let's maybe start with his where I think he's actually right, or close to right, which is where he believes power lies. That is where real power lies in the world in which we live. So most people think it's the politicians, it's the political parties, it's the president, it's the Supreme Court. But where does Yarvin think that power really lies?
And this brings us to Curtis Yarvin's most famous intellectual product, let's say intellectual construction, intellectual concept, which is the theory of the cathedral. The cathedral, think of the church, the cathedral. So what is the cathedral? Think about it as the institutions that truly rule, where power truly lies. And most importantly, the institutions that can tell people what to think. So think about the universities, research institutions, NGOs, civil services, and think about them not as a conspiracy. He describes it as an archipelago, this loose network without a central authority. And yet this archipelago, somehow, almost entirely these people think of the same things. So to put simply, if you go to a social sciences department in Harvard, or in Oxford, or in University of Kent, everywhere you will find people who believe more or less the same things. For example, about critical race theory, or about how capitalism sucks and all that stuff. Now, it is like a party line without a party. So this is what the cathedral does. It tells people what to think, and then these people expect from their politicians to do things in accordance with what the cathedral tells them that is the proper thing to do. So the cathedral is, in a few words, the intellectual and bureaucratic elites. And the life mission of Curtis Yarvin is to dismantle this rule of the intellectual bureaucratic elites. To use even simpler Twitter terminology, the cathedral is what dictates what we call the current thing. And the current thing changes. It can be environmentalism, gender studies, DI. All this, says Yarvin, comes from the cathedral.
Now,
Yes.
how do we relate that to, let's say, Ayn Rand's view that, yeah,
I was about to ask you.
yeah, the universities are what actually shape a culture. The culture shape, and culture is what ultimately will shape politics. Politics is not, it doesn't start with politics, it ends with politics. So what are the differences here?
One difference would be that actually it's not the difference. It's more of a practical application. So he would say that the bureaucratic intellectual elites is not just a shadow power. It is in essence a real power. So he had this interview with Tucker Carlson, and he said something like, these days you don't need to hack an election. What you have to do is to make an election meaningless. And how do you make an election meaningless? Well, whoever wins, it's the same governing elite, which is the true ruling elite. It's the same people, what we call the deep state, however you want to call it. They've been taught at the same universities from the same people with the same ideas. So if you're a Democrat, for example, and you're in power, you don't have to do much. Let these bureaucrats who believe all this, diversity stuff, just let them do their work. Just let them cook. You're just going to be the front man, and these are the people who actually do the actual exercising of power. So you could say a sympathetic reading would be that, yes, this is actually a recognizing of the role of the intellectuals. The problem is that for Yarvin, the cathedral is just, the left. But he doesn't go anywhere near in terms of explaining what exactly is this left. What is the essence of the left? For Yarvin, the essence of the left is power lust. And the essence of the left is change. We can come back later and explain why Wikipedia, let's say, would describe him as a reactionary. Yeah. But for now, for Yarvin, for example, the Union in the American Civil War, the Union was the left.
Yes. Yeah,
because
he's got a tweet today. Let me just find this. He's got a tweet today. This is what it says. The U.S. was created by a leftist revolution in the 1770s, then recreated by a rightist counter-revolution in the 1780s. This is the Constitution. The 1790s state was run by a national monarchy, by the revolution's general and his top aide working as co-founders. Basically, nobody knows the basic facts. And then he explains, but I think it's all nonsense. But here's the thing, the way he views left and right. So I think for him, left and right, you're right, is in a sense, left is egalitarian in some sense, although the founding is egalitarian only in the political sense, not in the economic sense. It's egalitarian, and it's, what was I going to say? So it's egalitarian.
Change, progress.
And it's progress. And the right is hierarchical and reactionary.
And order.
And tradition about. And what he misses, and what's missing from the cathedral, and why the cathedral is ultimately a false theory, is that it's a theory of power. So in that sense, he's a leftist, right? Leftists see everything in terms of power structures, there's no, everything is about control and power. And what's missing are ideas. What's missing is reason. What's missing is thought. What's missing is free will. If you control the citadel, by definition, you control everything. But it's all about exercise of power. There's nothing underneath it. There's no thinking about fundamental ideas. I don't see anything in him that is deeper than politics, right? There's nothing, there's no metaphysics, epistemology, or ethics. There's implied, and the implied there is kind of a traditionalist view of all those areas. But he doesn't see ideas shaping the world. He sees intellectuals shaping the world, which is not the same thing.
Yes, exactly. So, for example, so he claims that this domination of the left is not an issue of the last 30 years. He says for ages we've been ruled by the left. And
Since
he
the
says the rule of
Enlightenment.
the left is basically the rule of Harvard.
But to him, it's in the Enlightenment. The whole ideas of the Enlightenment are fundamentally ideas of the left, and therefore, since the Enlightenment, we've been ruled by the left.
That's why, for example, he would claim that a figure like Thomas Jefferson, he would say this, the cult of Jefferson, as he refers to it. He says it's a communist psyop. It's a communist development because they recognized in Jefferson one of their own. Because he would say Jefferson was influenced so much by the ideas of the French Revolution, and therefore Jefferson was a leftist.
Yep.
Whereas he would say, first of all, let me say here, I'm just parroting stuff. I'm not an expert in the American Revolution by any chance. You will comment on this. So the way he viewed, we can have a whole section on the American Revolution, but he basically says that there are two American revolutions. There are many actually American revolutions. Initially, it's a leftist project. It goes nowhere. It brings chaos. And then the adults in the room, like Washington, they decide, okay, we've had enough of this whole madness, the declaration, whatever. Now let's elect practically a king and let the adults clean the mess. So this is how he would view the American Revolution, and we can also discuss why he would consider the American Revolution a mistake and why we should have stayed loyal to the king. But
again, I think this goes to the heart of his true ideas. That is, what he rejects is the Enlightenment. What's at the core of the Enlightenment? The core of the Enlightenment, from his perspective, is progress, is the idea of human progress and the emphasis on progress, progressive growth, and a rejection of the old order, a rejection of the church, a rejection of monarchy, and an embrace of reason and, God forbid, individualism and political liberty. And he rejects all of that. Reason as reason is something that every human being has. He rejects that, right? Most people are sheep. And he rejects the idea of individualism as the standard by which we should guide that. He rejects individual rights. He's anti-Lockean in that sense. And he rejects political freedom. So he's an anti-Enlightenment intellectual, which fits him in with the post-liberals and the whole new right, which is basically the basic agenda of the new right is to reject the Enlightenment.
And notice also that even in his libertarian phase, it's a libertarian phase that follows not necessarily anti-Enlightenment libertarianism, but a libertarianism which is agnostic towards the Enlightenment. And since we mentioned Hoppe, give me 1 second. I want to show something to our audience.
Yeah, and Hoppe, of course, is also reactionary, right? I mean, he's also harkens back to the Middle Ages, the wonders of the Middle Ages with city-states and monarchs.
Yeah.
He hates the Enlightenment.
So I'm sure this is not Hoppe's choice. But it's interesting that in his book, The Economic and Ethics of Private Property, what you see at the front is
not
this,
a skyscraper, not a factory.
It's this isolated little hut. And I found something, I might be looking too much into it, but I always thought, that's interesting. Why would this be what you have in mind with private property? So yes, that's why he finds himself comfortable with this milieu. And actually, let me make a more general comment. My biggest disappointment with Curtis Yarvin, I expected that when he started hanging out with the new right, because to me there's no question he's very intelligent, that he would raise the collective IQ of the new right. But what happened is the opposite. Lately, we can talk about his views on MAGA and all that stuff, but lately seems to be the opposite. Like, his latest views is that the Democrats are about to import hundreds of millions potentially of immigrants, hundreds of millions. He thinks Fauci should be tried and all that stuff. Maybe
Even though Curtis Yarvin was pro-lockdowns early in the COVID pandemic. And I saw him recently also compliment the Nazis on their uniforms and on order.
Yeah, well, okay, that's you can never be sure how much. So Curtis Yarvin to me really reminds me of Zizek. Because in my mind, he is the Zizek of the right. And, I had the same fascination about Zizek that later I had with Yarvin. Both of these thinkers have the same symptom. They never get to what is actually the point. They're intellectual teasers. They're both intelligent. And it's interesting. I recently figured out that Zizek is reading Yarvin. They have these kind of parallel lines. But when they get to the basics, you call them metaphysics, epistemology, but even in the, okay, guys, what exactly do you want? What is your specifically is the ideal thing? So, for example, Yarvin used to say that, the transition to the new regime needs to respect everyone's rights. It needs to be a bit like East Germany. The regime fails, you go to the Stasi people, you tell them, okay, guys, thank you for your service, go home, you're going to get a pension. This abomination of an institution doesn't exist anymore. Recently, and again, I don't know, is he trolling? He talks about, maybe we should execute this or that. We should go to George Soros' bank account and bring it down to zero. Yeah. And he says, oh, I know, but people will say, property rights. So, okay, then, so you want full authoritarianism? Do you want basically socialism of the right? And why is this going to be better than socialism of the left? Well, he would say this is going to be hierarchical. We're not going to end up being the third world. So he's at the point where at this time, the ends, which are unclear, by the way, justify any means. Anything goes, violence, authoritarianism, to hell with property rights, anything goes.
And I think that's true of Zizek at the end, right? In the end, that's why he never really tells you, because what he really thinks is too ugly even for his audience.
Well, he actually told us in a book that has the guillotine at front. So he was brave in that. By the way, I have to say, this has nothing to do with this episode. I'm so sad that you never got to have a debate with Zizek. We should not give up on that. Our
contact in Slovenia says he won't do it, but they keep trying.
And he has read Ayn Rand.
I know.
He considers
I've heard him comment on Ayn Rand.
Yes.
His insight into hard work is pretty good. So
yes.
I mean, he would be an interesting guy to debate. And his debate with Jordan Peterson was so disappointing, because Peterson was so weak in that debate. He was so terrible that Zizek didn't really have an opponent there. So yes, it would be fun to debate Zizek, but and we've tried and we continue to try. I spoke to, I forget her name, from Slovenia, where he lives. She's still trying supposedly, but
let's hope it will happen.
Yeah, him and the two people who I've tried to debate several times and have turned me down are your two favorite people, Zizek and Varoufakis.
Well, though I wouldn't put them in the same category, because
I know Zizek
is intelligent and has some good takes.
Yeah.
The other guy, anyway, don't get me started.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to Yarvin though, because
yes.
Yeah. So yeah, as time goes by, I think the quality of his thought goes downhill the more he hangs out with a new right people. He's still the most serious thinker in the new right. I consider him way more interested than the Denins and the Hazonis and the Christian nationalists. He's definitely putting the most interesting questions. He's the most well read, or at least he gives the most interesting references. But the answers he gives are depressing, and the answers he gives are disappointing, at least for someone who shares my worldview and the worldview of many of our audience, I guess.
Well, I think to a large extent, what makes him more interesting, and I think he's terrible. So so that I think he asks the right questions in some way, but I think what makes him more interesting is the fact that he's in Silicon Valley. That is, his audience is audience of tech guys, and it's almost all guys. And they're sharp, they're smart. He actually is in that environment surrounded by really smart people. I think the rest of the right is, and he's had an influence over there. And he has to be interesting because, the tech guys, that's what's going to make it attractive. But I've been shocked at how positively he's viewed on the right. I did a debate last year in this Hamilton Society in San Francisco on Christianity, and a number of his fans were there. And then he just was at the same event, did a debate recently where he debated some opponents. And 600 people showed up. So it was massive. So anyway, he is in that environment where I think you have to be interesting and cutting edge. And I think his evolution from talking a lot about monarchy to talking more about corporate CEOs is part of the reason for that. So let's talk about, so we've talked about the Citadel, so he thinks
the
power
Cathedral.
lies in a cathedral. Sorry, the cathedral. Power lies in the universities and the media, and to a large extent that's true. It's not very deep because it lies in ideas which shape both the media and the universities. But to the extent that that's where power is manifest, that is, they're the ones that is true. So what do you do about that? How do you wrench power away from those institutions, or how do you rationalize our political institutions so they're no longer susceptible to the power of the universities? Because he's not advocating for changing the universities. He's not like us advocating for changing ideas. He's advocating for a power play.
He's advocating literally to make Harvard a parking lot.
Yep.
So what's wrong with why a democracy? Sorry?
How do you get to the point where you make Harvard a parking lot? Who is going to do that?
So first of all, let's have something clear. You cannot reform the system, he says. And first of all, he would say this is not democracy, this is oligarchy. Because he says in a democracy, so if you had a monarch, and how do I change the regime? You cut the head of the monarch, you change the regime. The problem with democracy, he says, that there are many different sources of power. And this is so by design. The modern liberal societies, he says, they have all these various tribes that constantly shifting in terms of who has more power over whom, one bureaucracy versus the other. Now it's HR and DI, tomorrow it can be someone else. But this has something good for the oligarchs. It is almost like an anarchy, a war of all against all. And this means in this anarchy, you have many mini feuds, mini fiefdoms. And all the apparatchiks of the regime have little enclaves of power in all these different bureaucracies. Mm-hmm. So it is very, very difficult to find where is the heart of this regime, where you can strike and destroy these bureaucracies. So the only solution then is that you need to give the executive power the green light to actually govern. So in his best days, Yarvin would say, I'm not asking to do anything beyond the rule of law. Lincoln did it. Johnson did it. Obviously, before FDR did it. His model is FDR. An executive who says, I will govern as if the powers I have are real, because they are real if I say they are real. So the executive power, he claims, if it wants, it can turn tomorrow Harvard into a parking lot. It can go to the Harvard people, say, thank you very much, take your pensions, go home. And I declare that this is going to be now a parking lot. So to give the benefit of the doubt, wouldn't you agree, Yaron, that Harvard is impossible to reform? It's going to be this nest of collectivism and altruism from now to the foreseeable future.
Well, I don't think reform is possible in the foreseeable future. So I don't think reform is possible anywhere in the foreseeable future. So yes, Harvard is impossible to reform in the foreseeable future, but I don't think you can actually change the world for the better without reforming Harvard. So ultimately, Harvard will be reformed, one way or the other. It might take 100 years, and that's why our project is a long-term project. But if you give up on Harvard and what Harvard represents, not Harvard as an institution, then you're giving up on reform. You're giving up on change, and the only alternative to reform is a reactionary alternative. It's a dictatorship that turns it into, and it's really interesting that he talks a lot about executive power, and look at the Trump administration. I mean, the Trump administration is almost inspired by him, right? The whole idea of if Trump wants something, he should be able to get it done. The whole idea, who cares about Congress or who cares about the courts? The courts are just an obstacle in the way. That is, I don't think it's unique to Yarvin. I think that everybody in the new left believes this. But we're seeing Trump get as close to any modern president has gotten to doing exactly that. And Trump, and this is, I think, the reason why the new right, at least some people in the new right like Trump, he's the closest person to also say he doesn't care. A lot of other presidents would have done what Trump does, but couched it in constitutional terms. Trump just doesn't care. And I think that's his big appeal to a lot of people is, he might, he'll go after Harvard and you'll say, oh, but that's not the rule of law. And he'll say, yeah, I don't care. I just want to go after Harvard.
And this is his biggest critique of the first Trump administration. So to the surprise of many of his readers in 2020, Curtis Yarvin said, look, guys, I support Biden in this election in strategic terms. Why? Because Trump, as he put it, he was strolling around the Rubicon, but he didn't even put his feet in the Rubicon. Yep. So he says what happened is the first Trump administration talked the big words about supposedly important things. Nothing ever happened. The GOP controlled all three branches of the constitutional government. It had the most populist president in modern history. And they did absolutely nothing of any historical significance. And his point is that the second Trump administration is different. Yep. Why? Because it is not playing by the rules. The president says, I will do whatever I want. I will completely bypass, this is the most important thing, bypass all the bureaucracies, bypass the foreign office, the diplomatic bureaucracy, even bypass people like Rubio. It doesn't matter what they tell you. What matters is what you and your people think, because you are the executive. Mm-hmm. You have the power to do it, so do it. And my question to Yarvin would be this. You want an executive to run a country like a corporation. How do you feel that now Trump runs the country, not in the way Jobs would run Apple, but in the way a drunk guy would run a bodega, a family bodega? Like, why is this better? Yes, he's giving some defeats, he's owning the libs here and there, although Yarvin would say we need 100 times more than that. But how is this your ideal of an executive who operates like a CEO? Does it look like Trump operates in the United States the way he operates, a CEO would operate in a serious corporation?
Not a good CEO. And this is the point. I think Trump is, and I think Yarvin in private would probably agree. He would probably say, yeah, Trump's probably not smart enough to be the kind of CEO I would want, right? The kind of CEO. And this is why we need to surround him with the tech bros, because those are the guys who are the smart guys in the room. Imagine Mark Andreessen running America. I think Curtis Yarvin would see a big difference between the two.
They are in texting relationship, by the way, with Mark Andreessen. They're in very good relationship.
Yeah, Mark Andreessen, it's been a while. And so I think that he probably thinks Trump has the right mentality in the sense that I'll do anything. It's at my whim, but he's just not smart. And he isn't, right? He's just not competent. And he's not competent. So the second Trump term has been much more along the lines Curtis Yarvin likes, but it's also not going to achieve much because He's not quite ready to ignore the Supreme Court. And he's not quite able to get around Congress completely. And when he had Doge come in, I mean, Doge was the perfect Yarvin thing, fire all the bureaucrats, get rid of them, turn the bureaucracy into a parking lot, and they didn't do anything. So he must be super disappointed in Trump's second term, but it's laying the seeds. It's indicating the direction in which a future, and this is why I think he'd support J.D. Vance, right? It's indicating what's possible in the future if he had someone. J.D. Vance is not an idiot. He acts like an idiot, but he's not an idiot. He's smart. And he would do a much better job at destroying this country systematically than Trump is able to. So, but Trump is kind of setting the context for a J.D. Vance or for somebody, or Tucker Carlson, who knows, or a Mark Andreessen. I mean, who knows who's going to run in the future?
It's fascinating. This morning, I was listening to a podcast by Curtis Yarvin. He said exactly what you said, that the only good thing that I can recognize good in terms of it's going to have a historical significance, this is slightly pushing forward the clock of history.
Yep. Slightly
make it move a bit more. So maybe one day the real revolution, no revolution, a reactionary
counter-revolution.
The real counter-revolution will actually take place, which, these are my words, not him, will move the clock back to probably either before 76, but his most of the historical references he's make are above my level of knowledge, so I can't comment on it. But somewhere there, I know his favorite monarchs are some of the Tudors and some of the Stuarts, so that's where we need to go.
Yeah, I mean, he's against the Glorious Revolution, so you'd have to go before 16 something, right? So you'd have to go into the 16th century to really get them, and and he probably loves Henry VIII. They probably have a similar view of women. Chop off their heads when you don't like them.
No, I don't think. To be fair with that, I don't think he's. The interesting thing is he introduced the term red pill in the culture, but in a completely different way. Actually, his personal relationship with women, it's way less. So when people hear Curtis Yarvin red pill, it has nothing to do with the red pill of the manosphere. So people.
So what does it have to do, since he introduced the term? What was it supposed to mean at the time?
Oh, okay. So that's interesting because it brings us to the book that almost no one had ever read, but he made it very famous, which is the book The Machiavellians. He made it so famous that it had to be reprinted. So this is a book written by an American theorist some 70 years ago. And it talks about the Machiavellians are politicians who understand what truly the game is. And truly the game is to fool the masses. So the message is there's always a formal message in politics and a real message. The formal message is idealistic, and the real message is what the bureaucrat truly wants. Think, for example, as the formal message, when DI talks about historical justice, empowering and listening to black voices. The real message is give money to the DI commissars. So the red pill is seeing through the formal message, the language that the powers to be used, and reaching out the real message. And this is also the message from the Matrix, the red pill, and the blue pill. So before the manosphere made the red pill a thing, Curtis Yarvin introduced it in a parallel, let's say, in a parallel trajectory, in a completely different context.
So here's Curtis Yarvin red pilling the Declaration of Independence, if you will, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
you got it.
This is a tweet from today. So Elon Musk tweets, I read the Declaration of Independence out loud today with heartfelt conviction. It is a work of not just of genius, but also purity of the soul that resonates this very day, right? It's a real heartfelt tweet from Elon Musk about the importance of the Declaration of Independence. This is Curtis Yarvin commenting on Elon Musk. He says, it's the 18th century version of corporate HR slop, wall-to-wall banalities. The period didn't feel like it had any people in it who were real human beings till I started reading the Loyalists. Check it out. Actual sense of humor, not to mention specifics. So he's, Thomas Jefferson, banal, Adams, all these guys, the banal HR slop, human relations slop. That's what he thinks of the Declaration of Independence.
Well, we can go through a whole tangent in terms of why he views the American Revolution, but
he rejects think about the second sentence of the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. Well, that's out. I mean, that's too egalitarian for him even when you understand equality as referring to rights. And then they're endowed with unalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Rights, I'm sure Yarvin thinks that's nonsense on stilts. There are no such thing as rights. And that's it. So the Declaration is a slop. It's HR slop to make people feel good about themselves, and it's leftist DEI propaganda.
So why, though, does this matter still today? So Yarvin would say, you have to be red-pilled about the American Revolution, and it still matters today to be a loyalist. Not only in terms of historical justice, but also because it will give you a better insight in the world of the 21st century.
Yep.
He claims that today we live in a theocracy, not in the way people think, like mullahs, but he would say the American Revolution was very much, and then the Civil War, was very much related to these Puritan zealots. And he claims today we are still, so any idealist who is not a reactionary is a Puritan zealot in his mind. And today, from climate change to Black Lives Matter, we are seeing the same thing in action. Puritan zealots who are attaching themselves to the state, and they are imposing their capital T truth. And he says this is even more the case with science. So falling for the means of the revolution means you fall for the myths that the current regime gives you today. So you are giving more power to the high priests of this theocracy, which is everyone from DI bureaucrats to Fauci or to whoever is there.
And for him, the far left today is a manifestation of the Declaration of Independence. It's a manifestation. It's a direct link between the two.
Because, again, Jefferson was a leftist in his mind. And
the idea of equality is a leftist, and the idea of individual rights is a leftist idea in his mind.
Exactly. It is because it's about change, it's about progress, it's about... And by the way, why should we give to the leftists this compliment? It's actually the opposite.
Yeah.
I want maglev trains. I want living till the age of 350. By the way, Curtis Yarvin is also bullish on maglev trains. How is the left, or when was the left in favor of change? I mean, last time it happened was more than a century ago, if you think about it. If we go back to 1926, the Bolsheviks have already given up this project. So why do you give the left this out of jail card where you present them as the advocates of progress?
Is Yarvin religious?
No. Interestingly, in the last years, I think he's more sympathetic to Christian nationalists.
Yep.
But no, on a personal level, no, he's not. Again, we're talking about a guy whose intellect is very, very high to take this crap seriously of religious fundamentalism. But on a political level, it's,
But does he see religion as the opiate of the masses in the sense that you need it, right? You need religion to keep the masses in check?
Depends who.
Because why is he a reactionary? If reactionary means going backwards to what? To religion, to faith.
Huh. Okay, but remember what we said early on. The vast majority of people, they are not to be trusted with thinking. So whatever you throw them, they will take it. Maybe as a pacifying, maybe as a pacifying mechanism. So
Yep.
an opium that you want to give to the
Yes.
patient. If you
Yes.
have a patient who is, they cannot think, they're in a semi-wild situation, give them opium so they're going to be tranquilized. So
Exactly.
maybe that's how he views the many.
Yep. I mean, a lot of conservatives over time have held religion in that. I mean, the neocons famously are a bunch of atheists who believe that religion is a good thing and that people need it, even though it's not true, right? Because you need it for morality. So even though there's no God, you still need the masses to believe there's a God because that keeps them from raping and pillaging and slaughtering each other.
I would give this even a slightly more sympathetic pass than Yarvin because at least the neocons would say, we are fighting for the West.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
In a mistaken way, they would say, we are for, the West, Enlightenment. Yarvin would see these things with utter cynicism. Like, what is the West? What is the, like, come on, guys, give me a break.
Yeah, he's anti-Enlightenment, whereas the neocons are, pro the Enlightenment, at least in a superficial way, and they're very big on the founding fathers and very big on the Declaration, even though they don't understand the Declaration. They're big on it. So yeah, no, neocons are head and shoulders above Curtis Yarvin. I mean, Yarvin is, he's smart and everything, but he's the gutter. He really is the gutter. He is prepping us for dictatorship, and explicitly, he's not pretending otherwise. He might call it a corporate CEO or monarch, but what is that in a political sense? Because he can't. One of the confusions he has, one of the evasions he is this idea of political and economic power. This is why he can think of a dictator as a CEO, right? But there's a fundamental difference between the two. I mean, even ChatGPT, when I ask it about Curtis Yarvin, says he's confused about this issue. And he thinks the incentives that work on a corporation in a competitive marketplace are the same incentives that work on a dictator. He said, this is ChatGPT. Here's ChatGPT for you. The problem is that sovereignty is not like running Apple or McDonald's. A corporation cannot legally imprison its customers, seal its borders, censor all criticism, command police and military forces, define the legal status of its residents. A sovereign can. Once one institution has final control over law, courts, police, money, borders, and weapons, customer service becomes an extremely thin protection. I mean, you got to give it to ChatGPT.
Wait, is this ChatGPT or Yaron AI? Because I'm impressed.
Now, it's ChatGPT with memory of everything I've asked it and everything I've ever said to it. So it's ChatGPT with a lot of Yaron and Ayn Rand in it. But that is pretty damn good.
It is damn good. And remember, again, you're never sure where this guy is trolling or where he's serious. But I think in that one he's serious. He thinks that it's perfectly fine to go to a Soros or something like that and basically just strip him of all his property.
Yep.
There's something very Carl Smith stuff there, the friend-enemy distinction.
Yep.
Everything goes against your enemies. Anything and everything goes. Politics is about power. Lenin put it, and I think he quotes Lenin in his book, Unqualified Reservations. Lenin's famous question was, whom? This means who controls whom, who is oppressing whom, and this is how he views politics. Whom?
Yep. No, and in that sense, it is. It's all politics. It's all power. It's the sense in which it's materialism. I don't know if there is anything else, particularly if he's not religious. It really does have a feel like that. And so let's talk about. He believes that the ultimate political outcome, his ideal, would be if America broke up into a bunch of small states, right? City states, each run by a CEO and competing with one another. And the way you compete is by citizens moving, leaving one and going to the other.
No, he hasn't spoken about state rights. Now, it's interesting that his reading of the Civil War is that whatever your moral evaluation of the situation, that the Union had zero legal rights to attack the states. Sorry, to attack the
Oh,
South.
sure. I mean, I'd expect him to have that position. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting how he's, oh yeah, moral aside, which is I would say it's the opposite. That's the main reason. I couldn't care less what the Constitution says. If there is
by
a
the way,
house.
this is the position of the Mises Institute. This is the position of libertarians. So of the Rothbardian type libertarians. So I'm not surprised I think he comes from that. He comes from an anarcho-capitalist, even whether he was explicitly or not. He comes from that milieu, and he brings a lot of that with him.
Yeah, I think it was Di Lorenzo from Mises who wrote
Yeah,
that book
Di
on
Lorenzo.
Lincoln. Yes, he read that. So he's not buying. He's more cynical than that. He's not buying even into that. I think he wants to prove that the Union should never have attacked the South, and he finds whatever will stick. But no, he's not in favor of the states being in competition. He would be okay with one CEO for the whole of the United States, because why not? It's if you can have that power in all the land, why not? But again, you won't find usually how a podcast with Curtis Yarvin goes. Someone asks him a question. He goes on a tangent, which is very interesting because, that's why people like listening to him. I like listening to him because he has a way with, history and all that stuff. Then after 20 minutes, people remember the actual question. The whole podcast is two questions, whereas and always people always, okay, please tell us what is this? How would a monarch, a CEO running, how would that look like? By the time they get to that question, we're 2 hours and 50 minutes in, he starts answering, he goes to a different tangent, and at the end of the day, he has not answered the question. So I don't know to tell you exactly what his vision is.
So, but clearly, what he wants is a authoritarian CEO / monarch running everything, doing whatever he wants. What does he view as the way in which we control that? Like he must realize this goes out of whack, and it becomes authoritarian, and he doesn't want he doesn't want crazy authoritarianism.
Yeah, he doesn't want. So he would say, look, how does a company make sure that the CEO doesn't start, I don't know, throwing chairs and breaking the infrastructure? Well, everyone in the board of directors has some common interest in the company not going downhill. These days, this is not the case with the state, because the state has all these different fractions. But once you move away from that, then you have the idea that, yeah, there is some common interest here, because you don't have these little feuds fighting with each other. But also every 4 years, again, you hope this monarch will be benevolent. So if in 4 years we tell him, thank you for your service, off you go, then he will go. Now, of course, this didn't happen in Russia. This didn't happen in Belarus.
Germany.
Yeah, for each one of these, he would have an excuse. For example, he would say, Hitler and Stalin are actually children of Western democracy. He probably means of the Enlightenment.
Yep.
Therefore, it doesn't count. Mussolini, well, he would probably say he's more of the left rather than a true rightist.
Yep.
So yeah, he will move the goalpost, or he will have an answer. But this question remains without an answer. Actually, how can we get rid of a benevolent FDR who decides that, you know what, I like the Napoleon example more than the FDR example? There's no answer to that.
Yep. Yep.
Before we go to the questions, shall we also mention something about his foreign policy takes?
Sure.
Horrible in Ukraine, he repeats, and again, I can understand how someone intelligent would repeat this.
It's not surprising, because you'd think that Putin would be somebody to admire. I mean, Putin is the dictator who does what he wants, and he has a board of directors. I think it's the oligarchs. Once in a while, one of them falls out a window, and they're not in line. And he's reactionary. I mean, Putin is reactionary on
Well,
religion, and he hates LGBTQ plus, which is the number one enemy of the universe, according to the new right. So, I mean, Putin. Why would I mean? It seems to me like Curtis would be very pro-Putin.
Well, he's repeating all the bullshit Russia propaganda about the
Yeah.
war in Ukraine. One of the usual examples he gives on the mistakes bureaucracy does is how they decided that it was a good idea to move NATO eastwards, as if this was the reason why Russia attacked Ukraine. So I think this is very cheap. Sorry if there's background noise. The guy upstairs decided it's time to see how far he can push his furniture. But he's better, much better on Israel-Gaza conflict. Actually, if you go back to 2023, he wrote an article about what should be the solution in Gaza. I don't remember all the details, and I didn't have the time to review it again. But it was one of the best articles, definitely in the New Right on that conflict. So he's good on Israel, not good on Ukraine, which is very weird to me. By what standard he decides that one conflict is worth supporting and the other is not?
Well, I think I don't think it's that. I mean, to me, it's if he really cares about power, then he's the opposite of the left, right? The left views power. Why does the left like Ukraine? Because Russia's strong and Ukraine's weak. And Ukraine is moving to the left, and Russia is right wing. So they hate Russia from that perspective. And Israel is strong, and reactionary in many respects. There's a religious element. There's a reactionary element. So it doesn't surprise me that he would support the strong over the weak.
And he manages to find a way to bring in the mix the cathedral. So he says the reason the Palestinians are suffering is because the cathedral in the West does not allow them ever to be fully defeated, which is true, by the way. And this has a horrible repercussion. So he somehow managed to also in that conflict include the role of the quote do-gooders in the West. So here's a very leftist idea he actually has. I just realized this. For everything wrong in the world, you have to find the deep state of Washington behind it. Everything that happens anywhere, the United States are behind it.
Yep.
And Kissinger, don't get him started on Kissinger.
Yep, he's don't get me started on Kissinger. So that we agree. But
we can do an episode on Kissinger when Neil Ferguson releases the second volume of the biography.
Okay. So you read the first one?
I'm waiting for the second. I want to read them. I started, but then I said, no. This has to be one thing. You can't.
Okay.
I want to binge read it.
Okay, good. All right. Well, let's see if we have any questions on Curtis Yarvin. We've got questions from all over the place, from football. Let me remind you guys that these shows cost double because there are two of us. So we share the super chat. So if $500 is kind of the minimum for 2 hours of me, then it's $1,000 for 2 hours of me and Nikos. So please take that into account in thinking about your support for these particular shows. We've got quite a few questions, but a lot of them are like the $2, $5, and $10 level. What we need are some $50, $100 questions, $20 questions, stuff like that, or stickers. You can also do stickers. Stickers are great. If you don't have a question, just you want to show your support, you want us to continue these. We've got plans for taking on both many of the intellectual movements, both on the left and the right. We're gonna. I don't know about equal treatment, probably not equal treatment, but we're gonna, because the left is so much more intellectual. There's much more to talk about on the left in many
Not
respects.
anymore. Actually, have you thought about it?
Yeah.
In the last 10 years, how many new thinkers of the left can you think? I can't think of many.
Yeah, but the thinkers of the right tend to be so shallow. I mean, we'll do the post liberals.
Yeah.
What else is there? I mean, Tucker Carlson's not a thinker. You know, demons scratching you in the night is not an intellectual position. It's yeah. I mean, anyway, we're going to cover them all. We're going to cover all of them, and those yet to be unearthed, new ones that are coming. We're going to talk about history. We're going to talk about. We're probably going to do a show on the Spanish Revolution, which I think is an interesting Spanish Civil War. Sorry, Spanish Civil War, which I think is an interesting civil war.
I used to call it
Design.
Spanish Revolution in my communist days. That's how every
Okay.
proper communist would call it.
So the counter-revolutionaries won that one. So, but yes, the Spanish Civil War and Franco. Franco is now, by the way, a hero of the new right. Many on the new right who don't want to say they're like Hitler or Mussolini because that's incorrect even among them. They become big fans of Franco, who led this amazing resurgence of Spain. It became this wealthy, successful, superpower under Franco. So I'm kidding. So they really love Franco as the model politician. So
and Jack Posobiec, who was a guest in the inaugural flight of the new jet that Trump has, so he's not a nobody. For many months on Twitter, every Friday, he would post FF Franco Friday with some song or picture of a Generalissimo. So it's important to talk about.
Yeah, so we'll do it. And I think I don't know much about the Spanish Civil War. And I don't think people know a lot about it. It's kind of and a lot of Americans participated.
And many intellectuals, I don't think there's been in history any war where so many intellectuals were so much invested from both sides,
Yep.
not just from the side of the
Yeah,
communists.
and it's interesting because every time I look at it, I go, I hate them both. Right? So it's and yet people got very excited about being supportive of one side or the other. Whereas it seems to me like it was the classical example of this is what happens when you let the crazy left and the crazy right go after each other. And anyway, we'll talk about it on a future show, probably 2 weeks. Did we say 2 weeks?
The coup of Franco, it's 2 weeks from now, I think, is the anniversary. It's somewhere 20-something of July. So if it's not the exact day, it will be around that
We'll
time.
probably do around there. We have to, the big issue then in 2 weeks, of course, is the World Cup final. So we're going to have to work around that. We might start the show even earlier so we can get the show done before the final starts. But a lot of content is going to be delivered. So please consider supporting. Let me thank some of the sticker people here. Chili, third super chat ever. Thank you, Chili. Thank you, Bonnie. Let's see, who else do we have here? We have Paul. Thank you, Paul. And Mike, thank you. And Gail and Cook and Fred Hopper. Thank you, guys. We need some of those, some of my whales. We need some of my whales to come in here and move that thermometer of money raised up because it's definitely lagging previous shows. All right, let's turn to your questions. Remember, you can ask about anything, but we'll take Curtis Yarvin questions first. And as it is, the only $50 question is a Curtis Yarvin question. So this is good. Josh asks, does the Curtis Yarvin story provide a useful lesson for us who wish to grow the influence of objectivism? Does his example illustrate a place for the essential factor, passion, and charisma in spreading an idea?
It's so interesting because if you put Curtis Yarvin in AI and ask AI, analyze the charisma of this guy, the result would be, sorry, this guy looks geeky. The way he speaks, he breaks every single rule of public speaking. I mean, it's become a caricature, he has a way which is, it's impossible to imitate. And yet, people listen. So the only lesson to be learned from this is that it's worth asking sometimes the difficult questions because high intelligence people will pay attention. That's the only lesson I can get from Curtis Yarvin of the unqualified reservations. Now we go back 20 years. from the Curtis Yarvin of today, I haven't got a lesson to draw.
I don't, I mean, these things are very interesting. I mean, Curtis Yarvin was, he was there at the right time in the right place, in a sense. He was in Silicon Valley and he was talking about what was going on. You know, the insight he has, I think what made him interesting is he understood that something was really happening in America that I think most of us didn't see. We saw the Tea Party and in a sense was seduced by the Tea Party to some extent. And we didn't see the underlying anger and fear and frustration and that was ready and willing to overthrow everything. And then I think even during the Biden administration, I think at the end we underestimated just how pissed off everybody was, including Silicon Valley ultimately, with woke and DEI and ESG and all this stuff. I mean, we hate it, but I think there's a certain sense in which, yeah, we intellectually know it's evil, we know it's bad, and we go on. But there are people who have the real hand on the pulse, and then what they do, and this is what we can't do, and this is why I think it's hard for us to be successful. They play to the trend. Now, I'm not saying he's faking it. I'm just saying it happens that his ideas are consistent with the trend. The trend is the left is the epitome of evil and needs to be fought by any means necessary. Let's bring out, you know, the guns, the whatever, and declare the American experiment over. And we are still trying to protect and defend the American experiment, trying to work, if you will, within the system. And America in the mid 2000s and certainly today, there were certain elements within America who were ready to throw it all out and start over and declare a revolution. And, you know, there's a sense in which I think if there was an objectivist out there in the mid 2000s saying, all right, this is it. It's time for revolution. It's time to go on strike. It's time to start all over again. Maybe they would have been more successful. Maybe that would have resonated with the kind of, but I don't think long-term, because long-term, I still think the long-term battle has to be won on the philosophical front, on the intellectual front. And what Curtis Yarvin is doing is he's taking the trend and reinforcing it and amplifying it. Now, that's because he supports it, but I don't know what we can learn from that. I don't know how we would do it. What would we do if I knew now what I know, if I knew then what I know now about the Tea Party and about Trump's coming and the whole attitude in the country, what would I do different? I'm sure there's stuff I would do different, but would it change things that much? I don't think so.
And to answer that question, we cannot do it on the spot because this would require deep thinking. By the way, Yaron, this reminds me, not to put you on the spot, but in around 2021, I was asking you whether you should try to come up with something like a theory, for lack of a better word, of revolution. So when would political action that would look like revolution be okay and among, let's say, I don't want to say let's say an objectivist inspired theory of a revolution. How do you know that what you see is a legitimate revolution, and what would it look like, and how would it be different from like a shit show, like, I don't know, like, imagine a more serious January 6th, for example.
Yeah. I mean, I think, a legit revolution would have to be focused on individual rights. It would have to be focused on, but individual rights in a sense of life sense. So, and this is why I think the Tea Party faked this out, right? Because there was something there, right? There was something about don't step on me, leave me alone, get the government out of my life. But it wasn't legit because it had no foundation. And it was also not legit, and this is important, I think, for revolutions. It was a revolution of old people. And revolutions are never of old people. Revolutions are for and of the young, right? Think about the founders and how old they were. They were all in their 20s and 30s, or early 30s, right? They were young people. And the French Revolution, all young people.
The Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks were all very young.
Yeah. So revolutions are of and for the young. And so imagine a tea party of young people. I mean, to some extent, you're seeing that a little bit with Millet, right? Millet's appeal is with the young, and the people who are taking his ideas seriously are the young. The people who are going out and reading the books are the young, and there is a sense of a positive revolution there. Now, where it will go is hard to tell because it's maybe too early for what Millet is trying to do, and he's not consistent enough, and he doesn't have the right moral tone. But so I think it would have to be young people. It would have to be these ideas of don't tread on me, leave me alone, get the government out of my life. You know what would make a great revolution right now? Is young people saying, I don't want to fund my grandparents. Screw them. Right? No, because what you're getting right now in America is the largest redistribution of wealth in human history. And it's from young people to old people. Imagine if young people woke up to that and said, enough. This is ridiculous. You old people, you've had plenty of time to save money, and you're taking our money that we're just starting out in life. You're taxing us to death. You're destroying our economy so that you can go on vacations and cruise around the Caribbean. Because that's what they're doing, right? So I would be inspired if young people said, we're fed up with feeding with the redistribution from us to old people. We want a life, and you're taking that life away from us. That would be kind of some of the material from which you would carve. But so it would be a self-interested, pro-liberty, not very intellectual, but at least at the level of I've had it. I've had it with so much government intervention and so much government involvement and so much government redistribution. But you see, where would that come from? Young people today. They would imagine. Even Nikos, when I said I don't want to feed my grandmother anymore, was shocked by that, because altruism does not allow anybody to say that. It just makes that impossible. So how would you get to a point where? So to me, when young people are ready to say that, all right, we're ready, but they're not going to be because this altruism is too deeply ingrained, and therefore what they look for is common good. The common good solutions, which and to be contrary and revolutionary, it's going to be authoritarian.
And you talk about Mark Andreessen. Check out, guys, a video that Mark Andreessen posted for 4th of July. It's a pure vibes video. Think about the BAP aesthetics. It has young people, dancing, jumping from cliffs, nice bodies. One of the songs playing is L'amour toujours, which is the Ausländer song. So and I mentioned Andreessen because there was a time he used to retweet me when I would post Ayn Rand stuff. I thought he was objectivist friendly. The only movement these days that creates an energy that looks like a revolutionary movement energy, unfortunately, is the far right.
Yep.
It is the only movement that can give rise to such a, however you want to call it, revolutionary, counter-revolutionary movement. And it is the movement that I predict will get most of the young people, because young people are attracted to that energy.
Yeah, and I'm watching the video right now. It's got fighter planes taking off. It's got soldiers coming back from World War II. It's got helicopters and aircraft carriers, and F-35s. It's masculine, right? It's very masculine and striking. And it's got Elon Musk rockets. That
sounds like probably he posted the second video. So two vibe videos by Andreessen, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and if you look, it's all about, he's got a bunch of stuff about Mars, and I'm just looking at his thread right now from yesterday. It's all about space and innovation, and But yeah, I mean, so I haven't seen the one with the good-looking guys, but he is. Yes, I think that the right, the far right has a positive agenda, American greatness, wrap around the flag. And Jason's not going to make a big deal about religion, but he will ally himself with the religionists in order to achieve what he wants to achieve. He's not anti-religion. He's just not pro. So it's the flag and the cross united around a pro-American masculine vision of the future, and I think that's why it appeals to young men more than young women, and I think it's got aesthetics. It's got the same aesthetics, the communists and the Nazis had. It's a materialistic, strength, physique focused.
But more life affirming. It's not about sacrifice. So
Because it's American, yes, that's right.
yeah.
Because it's much more American in that sense. We're going to sacrifice everybody else in the world to us, and so I mean, and you're right. That's who they are. It's got a pseudo heroic sense to it. It harkens back to the cowboy, but it's not. It's not individualistic. In spite of all that, it's not truly individualistic. It's still collectivistic. It's heritage Americans. It's the right kind of Americans. It's anti-immigration. So it's a dangerous right. It's a Curtis Yarvin right. All right, let's see. What else do we have here at Curtis Yarvin? NYK says, how does Yarvin's tech right connect to J.D. Vance's Christian right? I don't get it. Shouldn't the proponents of tech, AI, and spaceships be opposed to return to Augustinian medievalism?
Yes, if the main thing would be how do we get more spaceships and stuff. But the main thing, unfortunately, I think for Yarvin and all those people is how do we stop the main threat today? And the main threat is liberalism, not leftism, classical liberalism.
Yep.
You having control on your life for these people is a problem. Your freedom is a problem to be mitigated. That's why they find good company with the J.D. Vances of this world.
Yeah, and look, I told you about this Hamilton Society. I've talked about it a few times because it was truly shocking to me. But look, this is an organization where everybody's a startup founder, everybody's a tech guy, and yet they're all Catholics, or most of them are Catholics, but they're all Christians. Religion is a big deal. I mean, I did the session about Christianity is destroying the civilization, and it was 90% against me, right? The audience was all tech people, all Silicon Valley people. They were all against me. You have to, to come to the debates, in Silicon Valley, you have to wear a suit and a tie. This is like anti everything I believe in, and anything the Silicon Valley represented. I mean, this is the land of Steve Jobs, going to VC meetings barefoot and in torn jeans and without having taken a shower in 3 weeks. And now, founders are wearing suits and ties, as a requirement. You won't be let into the facility without a suit and a tie. This is, conservatism and religion. And again, there were fans there of Curtis Yarvin. There were fans there of a number of people said they were explicitly said they were racists. Talking about this is a white country and genes. I had this one guy who's from a Mexican heritage. I guess this is like Nick Fuentes, who said, no, Western civilization is Northern Europe. It's white civilization. And I said, I'd love to run it. I said to him, I'd love to run a 23andMe on you. You think Spanish is white? I mean, do you have any concept of who the Spanish were and how much Moorish and Islamic blood you have in you, if there is such a thing? Give me a frigging break. But
I was picturing Jonathan all this time revolting to the idea that there's something reactionary to the suits. I think we should bring bad suits. Having said that, someone asked about Curtis Yarvin. You can't go wrong with a leather jacket, so maybe lesson there.
If Nikos and I are gonna have a schism, it's gonna be over dress code. It's gonna be over a suit and tie, and their importance in life. Let's see.
By the way, remember, we don't have to do it today, but we have a song to review at some point.
Oh, that's right. So not today because I haven't
Okay,
listened to it.
but
Next
let's
Sunday,
acknowledge our
and
friend.
I know you reminded me, and Shazbot is out there somewhere waiting for his review. So, but I have to listen to the song. This last 2 weeks have been a little hellish. But let's see. And the next 2 weeks are going to be hellish. So, in a different way. All right, here's another Curtis Yarvin. Andrew says, is there a connection between Yarvin's view of human hierarchies and social power dynamics and Jordan Peterson's lobsters metaphor for social hierarchies?
I don't think there is any active dialogue between the two, but I can't think of any disagreement Curtis Yarvin would have with the lobsters theory, which, yeah, it's not even, he wouldn't consider it controversial or even worthy of much discussion. He would be, yeah, obvious, I think.
Yeah, I think it comes from the same place. It's a rejection of egalitarianism. I think Peterson's is probably a little more nuanced than Curtis Yarvin's because Curtis wants to go hierarchies all the way, and I think Peterson, at least sometimes, actually respects the Declaration and respects the idea of political equality, whereas Curtis doesn't. So, but it's a rejection. Look, I can't think of an ideology that's more evil than egalitarianism. I mean, egalitarianism is, and we should do a show on egalitarianism, or Pol Pot maybe. I mean, it's the lowest of the low. It's a negation of man as man, negation of the facts of reality, and a rejection of the individual completely. So the backlash against egalitarianism is justified. And then the question is, do you understand what it actually means? And what is the counter to egalitarianism? Because hierarchies, what does hierarchies mean? Does it mean some people are better than others? Yeah, of course. I mean, Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged is full of that, right? Some people carry the world on their shoulders and other people do not. Some people are makers and some people are takers. And are people the same intelligence? Of course not. People are different intelligence. So in every dimension, we are different, and they're better and worse, morally better and worse, and in other ways. The question is, what conclusion do you come to from that? What do you derive from that? From the fact that egalitarianism is wrong, how does that apply to your politics? And I think Peterson comes at it from too much of a biological perspective, an evolutionary perspective, saying we're just like lobsters. We've got a gene that says we step on one another. And there's a lot of zero-sum thinking in Peterson because of that, attitude. Curtis Yarvin comes at it from if some people are smarter than others, then the smart people should rule over the stupid people, and we should have the most ambitious, smartest person at the top, and he should rule over all of us. He comes at it much more as from Plato's Republic perspective.
100%. 100%. He mentions Plato very often, and I can't remember a single time that I recall him quoting evolutionary psychology, which I appreciate because evolutionary psychology has become this trump card that you throw on the table and you can anything goes.
So they are both responding to egalitarianism becoming this huge thing, particularly on the left, and rejection of that. But I think that I think they're responding differently, and Peterson's is less offensive politically because it doesn't lead to this conclusion of we need a dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see. That's Mondani. That's Trump. I'm looking for Curtis Yarvin. That's UK. You get a lot of questions for you on the UK. Does Yarvin not know the Confederacy shot first?
Excellent. Excellent question. Not only he knows that the Confederacy starts first, he claims there's a pattern. Notice the American Civil War, the First World War, and the Second World War. The reactionary powers in all these three wars shoot first, and Japan also shoots first. But why? It is because the liberal leftist strongest powers managed to put them in a corner where they had to shoot first.
Yep.
And the example he gives is, let's say you go to a dog and you start, poking his head. The dog gets annoyed. At some point, you stomp his. At some point, the dog will start barking. That's still not enough. You're still poking. Then the dog is going to bite you, and when it goes to bite you, you shoot the dog. You kill the dog. So, he attacked me. This is how he views the beginning both of the Civil War, end of the First World War and the Second World War, and the Atlantic campaign in the Second World War.
Yep.
More on that. Actually, let's give also, if someone wants to get an overall view of Curtis Yarvin, read the Unqualified Reservations, which is a collection of his earlier blogs, but combined as in a book form with continuity. So if you have to read one thing, that's where you should go. And he mentioned there this exact thing.
Cobb says, what is Yarvin's view of Christianity?
I'm not sure. It's not something he talks a lot about. He believes that as a political ally today, it is useful. Here's an example he gives. Here's what a revolution would look like. Imagine if in every university we would not have a DEI office, but we would have a MAGA office. So if two people apply there, the question would be which of the two would be more a fertile ground to make America great, more possible to make America great. And if it was a Christian and a non-Christian, the answer would be the Christian. Yeah. So again, is he trolling there? I don't think he's trolling. I think he views Christianity as a political ally.
Yeah, it reminds me, I told somebody at some meeting, a bunch of people there who's a big shot libertarian donor. And I said something about the new book I'm writing is The West versus Christianity. And his response was, you're not trying to make friends, huh, Yaron? So, he views the Christians as fellow travelers, I think. The general tendency is towards the same thing. I don't. I view them as the enemy, so.
Can you tell us something more? Is there any update when the book is out, if there's a publisher?
No, more publishers have turned it down. So we've got a long list of publishers who've turned it down. So still waiting. All right, Lone Dissenter. What's your take on the rationalist community? It seems it connects people like Yarvin on the right and the effective altruism on the left, flowing through these rationalists. Maybe a future show.
Thank you for your contribution, my friend. I have no idea, so I don't want to BS you that I have a take. I don't know these groups. I know they exist. I don't know anything about them.
Yeah, I mean, they're all in Silicon Valley, so I'm sure there's a connection, but we'd have to dig deeper and to discover it. Thanks for the idea of a future show. Maybe we will do that on the effective altruism. That would be a good show to do. Let's see.
I recall either Ben, someone from ARI has done a good podcast, but it's been some years, so I can't remember. I think it sounds like Ben, yeah. So go to New Idea. If you put Ayn Rand Institute or Ben Bayer effective altruism, you're gonna find stuff.
Yep. All right, let's take general questions. Okay, start with the $20. Is anti-Semitism like global warming? If it's too hot, it's global warming. If it's too cold, it's global warming. If something I don't like is happening, it's the Jews. If the opposite event is unfolding, it's the Jews.
I've seen on Twitter recently people who actually believe that Israel is helping Messi to win the World Cup because Milei
is pro-Israel.
But I mean, if anyone from the elders of Zion listening, if you do this, keep doing that. Keep doing that. We want that.
I'll talk to my contacts, Nikos. We'll work on it.
Anything for Messi to win that. But that happens with all conspiracy theories.
Yep.
And you mentioned our friend mentioned antisemitism. Notice that sometimes with antisemitism, it's exactly this. So you would say, they would say the Jews are boring and they're always kind of, they hate life. At the same time, they're promiscuous. Or they would say they're not loyal to anything, or they're too loyal to their group. So you can't figure, or they're too dirty, or they're too rich. So with conspiracy theories like that, you can never grasp something to start analyzing it. By definition, they have to be like that.
Yeah, and the reality is that the Jews are causing climate change. So the warmth and the cold, that's all the Jews as well. So
Oh, by the way, just to mention, this is not saying that climate change is a conspiracy. I don't think it is a conspiracy, despite all the political agenda and all that stuff. My example was for anti-Semitism.
no, but there's definitely a case where no matter what the data shows, it's climate change, right?
And Yarvin, perhaps his best chapter in his book is where he talks about the relationship between the Cathedral public policy and global warming. So it's one chapter from Unqualified Reservations that I'd recommend.
All right, let's thank SSSSSSSS090 for the sticker, and thank you. And who else do we have? We had one more, and KD Meta, something like that. Thank you, guys. All right, Liam, is there still enough freedom to push the boundaries and grow in the US? Whereas Europe doesn't have as many gaps and loopholes, is there regulatory apparatus, is in their regulatory apparatus to allow for an Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos to exist?
Okay, there are two questions here. Is there enough freedom for us to make a change? Obviously there is, guys. Think about our intellectual ancestors. Imagine going to the abolitionists and telling them, oh, we have it very difficult because, I don't know, the war control the universities. They would laugh at you. We have the internet. We have freedom of speech.
Well, think about the Enlightenment going up against Christianity.
Going against Christianity. There was a good chance that you could actually be put to the torture chamber. And we think we have it difficult. When it comes to whether Europe could produce an Elon Musk, actually I did a video recently which is doing quite well. The answer is no. And this has to do with how much, so the average American, even in California, you cannot imagine the bureaucracy in Europe. And this is why you don't see a European Elon Musk. But this is something that Yaron knows more, so I leave this to you.
Yeah, I think it's more than the bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is certainly a big part of it. And bureaucracy is a reflection of this. But it's a cultural problem. Europe doesn't have a culture of entrepreneurship, and it doesn't have a culture of failure. Elon Musk can celebrate when one of his rockets explodes, because we learned a lot. In Europe, if a rocket explodes, they're like, oh my God, this is the end of the world. You know, we spent $100 million on this. Shut it down. Immediately shut it down. And you're a failure. If you fail, in Europe, you're a failure. So you're never going to get funding again. In the US, if you failed and you go to under VCs, and you can articulate what you learned from it, no, I mean, it's a plus. You've tried already. You have some experience. The whole culture is different. America has a culture of entrepreneurship and innovation and a respect for failure. Same in Israel. Israel has a culture of that. Sweden is probably the country that has the closest culture of entrepreneurship in Europe. But Europe doesn't have an Elon Musk. Partially because Elon Musk wouldn't immigrate to Europe if they could because of the regulatory state, and partially because the culture is so oppressive and anti. I mean, think about France. I mean, God, I mean, the best minds in French education, the best job you could imagine, the thing that they all strive to go to is to become a bureaucrat. I mean, to work in the French civil service is... I mean, here, you know, a lot of kids would like to go and start companies in Silicon Valley, even ones who probably can't. In France, they don't even think about it. It's how do I get a good civil service job?
And remember, some years ago, the European bureaucracy went after Ireland because Ireland was giving a good tax incentives to Apple.
Yep. All right. Oyvind says, I'm sorry, Brazil. Here, but no longer. The Vikings are coming for you. And
I'm with you.
And we want it badly. Holland and Norway, Let's finish. Go. All right.
So not only I'm with you, my friend, there's only one team in history that I have not supported, I think, in a single game, and that was Brazil, because my growing up football, my formative memory was the World Cup of '94. I am so still heartbroken by Roberto Baggio not winning that World Cup because of Brazil that I will never. I supported even Turkey in one game in World Cup 2002 against Brazil. So anyone but Brazil. When they got the 7 goals by Germany in 2014, I had like a manic nervous laughter. I mean, I can understand. I have Brazilian friends. I can understand the pain. Sorry. Okay, this is not gonna make
So,
me many friends.
so we're gonna have a schism over clothing and over Brazil. This is the other source. I'm a huge Brazil fan. I grew up. The first World Cup I saw was probably 1970 on black and white TV with Pelé. I grew up a huge fan of Pelé's. And I love Brazil. Rio is my favorite city. If you can abstract away the crime, Rio is a great city, and I love the Brazilian spirit. I love the way they play the game, and the showman. And you can see that in Junior right now. Anyway, I'm a huge Brazilian fan. And so I'm gonna go up against all of you
No,
guys.
I understand. First of all, Brazil 1970 is the team, the yardstick that we compare all other teams. They had Pelé, Jairzinho, Tostão, Rivellino, these four at front.
Yeah,
It's having said that, since then, Brazil won twice in '94 and 2002. Both times they did not win by playing impressive football. So it's a myth that Brazil was always, oh, jogo bonito, we play nice football. They played nice football many times and they lost. The two
yes,
times they won the World Cup, they
yes,
played boring football. In 2002, they were playing with three central defenders, for God's sake, if you
yeah,
remember. So
that's true.
it's a myth that Brazil was always the fun team.
No, but Brazil has been a fun team, but lost, sadly.
Yeah,
Uh, all right, let's see. Andrew's come in with $50 question.
thank you.
Uh, no, he says no modern intellectual except objectivists uphold individualism with vigor. Most outright deny it, politically and metaphysically. Their versions of individual mission or life's purpose are based in social power dynamics which cannot bring fulfillment. So I guess that's
This
more of a
is
statement than
true.
a question. Yeah.
This is true on intellectuals, but notice how cultural figures, for example, David Goggins, he's not going to say anything about individualism. He has a lot of altruist messages, but it's implied individualism. You see someone doing brilliant things and you get inspired by the power of the individual achievement. So I don't think the culture is such a wasteland towards individuals. On the intellectual level, yes, we haven't managed to break the code and to see how we make the leap to make it an idea which is appealing. But a dormant individualism is out there. I mean, just go to a library and see the self-development. It's like half the bookshop these days.
Or the one businessman in the last 50 years who's viewed positively is Steve Jobs. And there's definitely a strong sense of individualism in Jobs, in the way he presented himself, in the way he presented the products. The products were for human consumption, for human betterment. Like them or not like them, he was the epitome of kind of a individualist in business.
And also in sports, we
Yeah.
admire sports is this microcosm where we admire individual achievement as it should be.
All right, Molten Splendor, thank you for the $50. Third
Thank you.
attempt to send a super chat. Sorry, I've been absent, busy summer. Does Yarvin's current popularity signal a culture that wants to be led rather than wanting independence? How do we counteract this tendency?
If I knew how we counteract it,
We would
yeah,
do it.
I would have done it.
Yeah.
It signifies, I think it's what Yaron said earlier, how many people are so disgusted with the current regime that any intellectual who provides a roadmap for how to go from point A to point B they actually listen. And again, Yarvin is clever, he's well-read, and he has a way. So I'm not surprised how he's influential, and he managed to attach himself to a winning bandwagon. And again, he didn't do it to go after,
Yep.
I don't know, prestige or something. I think it was organic, and it was good timing, as you said earlier.
But here's the thing about these intellectuals, and this is what, again, I think makes objectivism hard. And I'm not just trying to justify our lack of success, but I really think this. They don't demand much of you, right? To be a Yarvin follower, what do you need to do?
Enjoy him.
Yeah, enjoy it and be angry and be mad and join the revolution when the time comes. But it's not going to come, so you don't have anything to worry about. He's not demanding you change your life in any way. He's not really challenging anything fundamental. Yeah, you're going to advocate for unpopular ideas, but he's not actually demanding of you. And think of Jordan Peterson, hugely successful, and presents himself as challenging you. But the challenges are minor. Make your bed, stand up straight. I mean, it's only to a generation whose mother never told them that does this sound radical. Like my mother, from when I was this big, said, make your bed and stand up straight. That's why I don't make my bed, never have in my entire life. And I still don't stand up straight, right? But those are things that we were told by authority figures in my generation. I think authority figures are gone. So Jordan Peterson coming out and saying, take responsibility for your life, but in a shallow, without the real kind of objectivism says, take responsibility for your life. I mean, it says, here's the tools, use reason, think. And that's not appealing because that's hard. That actually demands something of you. That demands that you, now, I think the upside is much bigger as a consequence, right? Like Gauguin, if it's hard, there's probably something on the other side. But just like very few people follow Gauguin's strategy of really, half killing yourself in order to get over the hill, very few people adopt objectivism. But Yarvin, Peterson, more intellectual, but again, somewhat superficial. All of these people don't ask you to actually challenge religion, challenge altruism, challenge collectivism, challenge statism, and take responsibility in the deepest sense for your own life. And that requires a lot of balls to want to do that. And they don't demand that of their followers.
Having said that, the success of Gauguin's and the success of Stoicism shows that our ceiling is, we can do better. Let's just say this.
No question we can do better, but we disagree about Goggins. I don't view him quite as positively as you do. But,
no, that's not about it. It's about that people are hungry, thirsty for meaning, thirsty
but he's
for
not
an idea.
Successful in the sense, and because he demands so much, he's not successful in the sense of people doing it. People consume his material. They listen to him, they get inspired by it, but they don't actually go do it. How many people actually do challenge themselves in the way Goggins challenges himself? Very few. I know, but they like to listen and think that they do, but they cheat all the time, and very few do. And Stoicism again. What's it asking you to do? It's not really asking you to challenge everything you believe.
Well, cold showers are not easy. I mean, even this simple thing, think about it.
No, I know it's not easy, but it's in the physical domain. Sure, you can ask people to do incredible things in the physical domain. You see that in the army, right? You take kids in the army, and they will do amazing things in the physical domain. It's in the spiritual and intellectual domains where it's very hard to demand people do something hard. In physical domain, look at the the Iranians send little boys out to walk on landmines, and in the physical domain you can do amazing things, but it's the spirit. I mean amazing things in a sense of
this reminds me.
Yeah.
If we do at some point an episode on the Iran-Iraq war, I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
the craziness, this is perhaps the craziest war in the history of
Yep.
humanity. So we could do at some point something about it.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Shruti says, "Cheers to the show. Thank you for the support, Shruti." And did we get other stickers? Did I thank Natural Observer? I don't think I did. So Natural Observer, thank you. Arthur, the Enlightenment fizzled out in Germany first because Kant presided more consistently, but it appears it was only a matter of time before the Enlightenment was dissolved in other Western countries as well. We're seeing it now. I mean, the Enlightenment fizzled out in more than just Germany. I mean, Kant had massive influence over the entire Western world, and it wasn't necessarily directly through Kant; it was through Hegel, and then who spurned the whole nationalism all over Europe, and then kind of a secular spiritualism or mysticism, and then Marx, of course, who's a descendant of Kant, and his influence on globally. So it's not like Kant impacted Germany and nobody else. Kant impacted everywhere. And impacted America. Impacted America. So the Enlightenment has been fizzling out for 250 years. The peak of the Enlightenment, the greatest achievement of the Enlightenment, and its peak influence was 1776. And it's been slowly in decay. Now it's taken longer to decay in Western Europe, west of Germany, and in the United States, particularly. I'd say it's taken longer to decay in the Anglo-Saxon world for a variety of reasons, but it was in decay. There's no question about that. Ryan, FIFA subsidizes small and poor countries to compete at a high level. Is welfare in FIFA a positive or negative force in the sport? Is FIFA just as corrupt as the UN? Love you guys. Keep it going.
FIFA is more corrupt than most people would think. There was even a Netflix documentary. Yeah, part of the reason why they have all these teams, it is this egalitarian premise that we're going to have more small countries. Having said that, mostly they do it for the money. So it is corruption plus on the surface level some showing. But just think when the last
Isn't it a way to do marketing? Isn't it a way to expand the scope of interest in football and to watch more games and to be more engaged?
And in basketball, for example, the NBA has the salary cap, which means no team can become a super team. If this is agreed voluntarily, it makes sense. It's not socialism. It is the reason why in the last how many years we have, let's say, 7 different NBA champions. It makes the game more interesting, more marketable. So if there is a context within which I understand it. Now, in terms of FIFA corruption, just think World Cup in Russia and then World Cup in Qatar, for the love of God. And the next one, Saudi Arabia.
Really?
Yeah. It's already
When?
decided. In 4 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So probably
that's corruption. That's just money being handed out. Yeah.
Probably again, it's going to be on winter like in Qatar, which is a great memory because Messi won. But otherwise, a World Cup in the winter, it went against every instinct and every memory that we have of World Cups.
And the World Cup anyway. All right. Not your average algorithm. Okay. These are the 10 and 5 and 2 questions. Mamdani, alienating the wealthy is suicidal. How emboldened to be destructive is he? How emboldened to be destructive is he, given the success of democratic socialists throughout the country? Yeah, I mean, socialists are always destructive. I mean, there's no other way around it. The whole ideology is an ideology of destruction. The whole ideology is an ideology of alienating the wealthy. What else are they supposed to do? There's no way to be a socialist and not alienate the wealthy. So it's inherent in what they do. Right now, they're emboldened by the fact that they're winning in Democratic primaries. We'll see what happens in the midterms, but and we'll see what happens longer term. But yeah, I mean, socialists right now are emboldened. They're also emboldened, by the way, by the fact that the Republicans are socialists too. I mean, the only disagreement between Bernie Sanders and Trump is what percentage of AI companies should the government own, right? Sanders says 50%. OpenAI just offered 10% to Trump. He's negotiating. So, the owning the means of production, they agree. It's just a question of how much.
Also, notice that from the famous 5 main policies that Mamdani was elected, he's not going to go through them because he's going to alienate the rich in words and he's going to have some anti-rich policies. But at the end of the day, as a power luster, he'll keep it at a level where it's not going to be an exodus that will completely destroy New York.
Yeah, and sadly, the rich won't stand up for themselves, with a few exceptions. They don't stand up for themselves. So alienating them doesn't prevent them from making money and paying taxes and maybe even voting for him next time. Because remember who voted for Mamdani? It was the upper middle class. It was young professionals. It was people making $250,000 and above. They're not super rich, but these are wealthy people. These are not the working class. Working class hates socialism, which is interesting. All right, not your average algorithm. If Donald Trump takes a 10% stake in OpenAI, will that mean the industry will be regulated less because he doesn't want any industry he has a stake in to be slowed down by regulatory barriers?
That's like saying if we nationalize coal in the UK again, is coal going to be less regulated?
I mean,
but you know this more, so I leave this to you.
Yeah, I mean, what does regulation mean? It means doing what the government tells you to do. And if you own 10%, then the industry will do what the government tells it to do. And so and if you own 80%, they'll even do more of what the government tells them to do. So it's meaningless to talk about it this way. I mean, this is like trying to justify evil, which is the government taking 10% in OpenAI, because it's Trump and you can't tolerate the idea that Trump would do something anti-capitalist and bad. But no, this has nothing to do with regulation. Trump could just veto any regulatory bill that comes on his desk if that's what he wanted. He could just not pass any regulation against AI if that's what he wanted. No, he truly believes that the government should benefit from the success of AI. The government, this is who Trump really is. It's not about regulation at all.
Speaking about Trump, I don't know how to send super chats. Keep $10 from my salary. This week, when you talk about Trump and the NATO summit, can you talk about if he sells F-35s to Turkey? Can you comment on that, please? Because that's driving me mad.
Sure.
This shows you cannot trust this guy. Like, if this guy tells you today it's Sunday, you have to go and check your calendar. You cannot believe this. You cannot trust him with anything.
No, and look, Erdogan, well, I'll talk about it on a show this week, but Erdogan, he's done what Erdogan has asked for, since his first term. This is part of the big falling out he had with Bolton. All right, Harper Campbell. If our politicians don't understand capitalism at all, why does it still exist? It doesn't, right? We have a mixed economy. We don't have capitalism. So our politicians don't understand it, and therefore it doesn't exist. What we have is a mixed economy, and the politicians, what they play around with is not offending whatever's left of the private economy so that they can, have some economic growth and have some tax revenue growth and stuff like that. But it's not capitalism that they are defending or promoting or saving or anything like that, because there isn't.
And unless the politician is a true believer at the level of a Pol Pot, they want to keep alive the cow that feeds them, or whatever the phrase is. So even when the radical left was in power in Greece some 10 years ago, they did not completely destroy all businesses because they need them in order to keep milking them.
James, will a small rational minority always prevail over an irrational majority?
No.
No, I mean, all of history is an examples of irrational majorities killing all the more rational minorities. I mean, think about Nazism, think about the Soviet Union, think about all these things. So no, it's a particular type of minority in a particular context. All positive change is made by minorities, but that doesn't always mean that the minority, even rational, will always win. The circumstance of history could go the other way completely.
And usually when you have bad guys on the one and bad guys on the other, the rational minority is either going to disappear or they have to make an uncomfortable choice. Case in, for example, that's exactly what happened in Spain. If you were a centrist, you're like, okay, I'm between the Stalinists who want to kill me and the fascists who want to oppress me but not kill me. Well, I want my head, so I'll better go with the fascist. So, yeah.
Neo says a player from Cape Verde was chosen from LinkedIn. Okay. They still played well. I was actually impressed by, the actual play. They played well.
They played well. They didn't play like Paraguay yesterday, who
Exactly.
played like thugs.
That was
And
terrible.
they actually tried to play football. And and what a nice story, their goalkeeper.
Yep.
40 years old, he has his claim to fame at 40. And, Messi gave him congratulations. Very nice story.
Yep. What factors, this is Chilfran, what factors would most effectively integrate Europe? I think making English a co-official language in all member states would help.
Why would you integrate Europe? First, you want to decide what to integrate it around. So at the moment, there's nothing around to which integrate Europe except the European bureaucracy. So let's have free movement, let's have all that, but any further discussion around integration, if there is not something to integrate around, I find it meaningless. And also, it's going to be so politically unpopular, it's not going to fly at all.
Yep, it's not happening. Taim, Nikos, is UK in a worse cultural place today than in the 1970s? Also, could you make a video on how Tony Blair changed Britain into what it is today?
I'll make soon a deep dive with my Patreon on Margaret Thatcher. With Blair, I'll have to do a lot of work, so give me a horizon of 5-6 months because I haven't dove that deep. The UK in the 70s was around in the same mess that it is today, just in a different way. Back then, it was more like the entitlement of the organized working class, of the unions. But the average person in the street was more immune than the cultural craziness of today. So a lot of the cultural craziness of today in the UK would not fly in the 1970s. So in that way, the UK is worse today than in the 1970s. That's the one thing. The other thing is that when there was the short-lived and very timid cultural revolution of Thatcher, there were people who was ready to embark on it and to accept it. So, for example, it's unimaginable today that the Sun, the most popular newspaper, would jump on a Thatcherite platform. But it did in the late 70s. So there was something there that was healthier than today. So in that way, today it's worse. But yep. You also know about UK. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know how Tony Blair changed Britain. I don't think Tony Blair had that big of a role. I think he was in the end, he'll be a nothing. But he just carried the momentum, post-Thatcher momentum, more than anything else. And because they never added anything to Thatcher, it was just a question of when that momentum would end and we'd get what we get today. And what we get today, Britain of today, is a product of the conservatives. It's the complete failure of the conservatives. You can't blame the Britain of today on the left at all. All the bad policies that are in place in Britain today were entrenched by the conservatives.
Or at least they did not touch them. So think about the hate speech laws. I'm not going to talk to you about the welfare, the nanny state, which for me is the worst thing that Blair left behind. Think about the hate speech laws. Conservatives had all these years to change them. They didn't even touch them. Think about Michael Gove, supposedly our guy, Institute of Economic Affairs keynote speaker a million times. Remember him clapping Greta Thunberg. He was a conservative. The conservatives were in power for 14 years. And they made things much, much worse. From all the topics that, peak wokeness was during the conservative years. Immigration from Islamic countries that you've no idea who is there, who is an extremist, mostly peak through the conservatives, check the numbers. So yeah, I'm not. Blair was very, very bad, but at least it was also a time of cultural dynamism. With the Tories, it was just controlled decay, which was actually accelerated decay, not even controlled decay.
Yep. Nikos, what do you think of Mehdi Hasan?
I haven't studied him very closely. I get he's a bad guy, but I can't give you a good answer because I haven't followed him closely. Sorry.
All right.
He looks more like the respectable face of these ideas. So in that way, he might be more dangerous than someone who's absolutely crazy. But I'm not sure. Sorry.
Michael, are police in the UK basically useless unless you post non-left-wing things on social media?
So the thing you have to understand about the police, because I used to work at a university that was training police officers. The average police officer gets the same training that a sociology student gets with all the poison, the Marxist and the woke poison, the postmodernist poison. So yeah, the police in the UK is culturally very different from the police in the United States. But again, they're doing something, they have a very difficult job.
Yep.
So I have sympathy for them because they have their hands tied. But at the same time, I'm not optimistic at all. They are intellectual children of the same system that has given us the summer of 2020 and all that stuff.
Yeah. Time says Charlie Koch backed higher taxes on woke firms. I don't think that's true. I don't know if that's true, but I don't think
Say, what, Charlie Kirk?
Charlie Koch backed higher taxes on woke companies.
Yeah, there are many such examples. So Rufo has suggested, for example, using the Civil Rights Act to attack woke universities. And here I'm with Curtis Yarvin, who did a criticism of that, says you cannot play with the tools of your enemies. No, if you have the guts, go against the Civil Rights Act, not the part where it bans the state discriminating, but when it forces, basically takes away private property rights. Similarly, if you have the guts, go against taxation and go against the idea of taxation and the morality of taxation. Playing favors, political favors. Okay, then in 2 years, Gavin Newsom comes, he's going to put higher taxes on MAGA companies and on Chick-fil-A. Does this make sense?
Yeah, and it strikes me as anti-constitutional. I'm not sure how exactly, but I'm sure it is. Wyatt says, were there questions you missed from July 3rd? Probably. I mean, I had a complete meltdown of my Super Chat app, but I think it was from YouTube. YouTube had a complete meltdown, and those questions just disappeared. So I answered all the ones I could retrieve. I don't know how to retrieve the ones I didn't. So if you had a question, ask it again with $2 or something, so that it doesn't cost you too much to ask it. All right. Alexa says competitive sports can only have one winner. No one remembers who came second. Can that lead to fester a zero-sum game mentality in the culture?
No one remembers who came second. My biggest football idol from now till eternity is Roberto Baggio from 1994. So I completely disagree with that. My favorite basketball player for years was Charles Barkley. He never won a ring. So this idea that the first is first and the second is nothing, they think this is like an American phase. No, actually the person who came up with it is a British manager, and I don't believe in it. No, it's not the case that the second is nothing in sports. Quite often we remember them more than the first. We all should remember Johan Cruyff. If I ask you who was the left winger in the field, not in politics, of Germany in 2014, most of you won't remember it. But you should all remember Cruyff, although he never won a World Cup or a major tournament with the Netherlands.
You got it from the expert, Alexis. Time, what do you think of James Fishback?
Who?
James Fishback is running for, in the primaries, in the Republican side for governor of Florida. Why do you have to ask? I mean, James Fishback is a racist, anti-Semitic, a nutcase, and the fact that he has anybody supporting him, the fact that young Republicans in Florida are excited about him and supporting him is a testament to how insane right-wing culture is right now. So
But while you're answering, I need to plug my laptop. I'm right back.
he is a really, really, really bad guy. So and you know that shouldn't surprise you that I think that. Just look at what he says. He's anti everything I believe in, from capitalism to equality before the law, and he's a real anti-Semite, and he hates very bad on foreign policy and very bad on capitalism. All right, Keith asks, please explain Nick Land and Deleuze. Do you know anything about these people?
I know about Deleuze, but who is the other one?
Nick Land.
Are we talking about Deleuze, the philosopher?
I have no idea. I don't know who these people are. I've never heard of them.
Yeah, so Deleuze is one of the most famous postmodernist philosophers. He wrote with Felix Guattari, another postmodernist, one of the most famous postmodernist books. It is absolutely unreadable. I had to read it for my PhD. I was teaching that stuff. If we do a show on postmodernism, you're gonna hear more on Deleuze. Now, he might be talking about a different Deleuze, like a rapper or a streamer or something, and I'm completely missing the context here, but yeah, where to begin with Deleuze? There's nothing there that I can grasp and start talking about it, so it's difficult to say something.
And Nick Land is supposedly a British philosopher formerly associated with the University of Warwick, and Cybernetic Cultural Research Unit.
Unfortunately, my friend, I don't know.
His
Sorry.
major early book was The Thirst for Annihilation. There's a book for us, Thirst for Annihilation.
Okay, that rings a bell.
Okay.
But
Nikos will look into it because
also, if you are part of my Patreon community, I did a deep dive with my patrons on postmodernism. Even if you join in retrospect, you can get the recording or you can ask a question in the next AMA. Anyone who asks me any AMA question, obviously I go and research it so I can have a deeper look at it. But now that you mentioned that book, it rings a bell. I think someone brought him up in that deep dive. I'm not sure.
Enric says, who are the fellow travelers of Objectivism and their influence in time, where the influence with, and can their influence in time coalesce? Who are the fellow travelers of Objectivism?
Some obvious fellow travelers are some good classical liberals. Some fellow travelers are people who have a high view of human potential. What we would call transhumanists for me would be obvious fellow travelers. Beyond that, maybe some people who are very disappointed with the madness out there. Think of an average viewer of Sam Harris for whom egoism would be too hard a pill to swallow, but he would appreciate the role of the mind and all that stuff. So from the top of my head, that would be the answer.
I think I'd add to that the defenders of the Enlightenment, Steven Pinker, somebody like that. Not completely a fellow traveler, and interests don't coalesce completely, but certainly moving in a positive direction versus moving in a negative direction. Some economists, classical liberals call them. So I would say the classical liberals are the closest, but too many of them are crazy libertarians. But the better ones, the better classical liberals. All right, Dan from the UK. Has there been a think on par with Ayn Rand since she died, or even before? Love these shows. Thanks. Come on, England. I don't think
Come on,
so.
England, indeed, but that's a difficult question. Definitely not after. I can't think of anyone, but before.
Nobody after, and even before. I mean, in terms of the total positive presentation of a philosophy, Aristotle, but you really can't think of anybody else.
And people, sometimes to appreciate good jazz. So the problem when you listen to jazz is you start listening to Louis Armstrong or The Bird, all that stuff, and you don't have a point of reference. If you go to a you need to a school band. You understand how good, really good jazz is. Where I'm getting with all this. I used to have a very high esteem of Nietzsche just by reading Zarathustra. If you read the metaphysics and the epistemology of Nietzsche, particularly his epistemology, and his non-existent ethics, you realize what a true deep thinker and a system builder Ayn Rand is. So the more I dive into other philosophers, the more I appreciate Ayn Rand, because my disappointment in these other philosophers and how high the bar is with Ayn Rand. So I'm not an expert on the field, but to be honest, I cannot think of a single philosopher that to me comes anywhere close, a single thinker.
Neo says the White House called FIFA to ask FIFA president to review Florian Balogun's red card. Ban has been lifted.
Oh,
Trump is everywhere.
okay, that's excellent news. First of all, Balogun should be the name. If in Atlas Shrugged there was a striker who is striker because he's in the strike, but also striker in football, his name should be Balogun. Isn't this a very Randian name? Like Judge Narangasen, Balogun, like ball and gun. What a name for a striker. It's excellent.
It sounds like balagan, which is a Hebrew word, which is messiness, complete chaos.
Yeah, it's a name that you could imagine him like in a comic. He does he scores crazy goals. It's good that. So I think when a red card, the problem with a red card is you miss the next game. So when a red card is a mistaken red card, there should be some process of appeal. Now, should this appeal be Trump picking up the phone? Probably not. But the result is a good result. Now that Balogun is playing, I think the game starts from 50-50 with Belgium. 50-50.
Okay, good. All right. Shruti says, just sending more support your way. Thank you, Shruti. Appreciate that. Times says, Nikos, U.S. mass immigration started by Blair. Yeah, but you also assume that UK's problems are mass immigration. I mean, mass immigration might be a problem, but that is not the essence of the UK's problem.
There would be no mass immigration if you didn't have the welfare state, which the conservatives did not touch. And if the police and the intelligence services were doing their job, which again looks like they don't do it. So yes, I mentioned mass immigration the way it affects England today for reasons that are not immigration related, but are Islamism related. But again, look at the numbers. When did most of these people come in? During Blair or during conservatives?
And when did these grooming gangs, when were they active? They were active during long periods of time in which the conservatives were in power and they did nothing about it.
When was it unsafe for Jews to go out? It started with conservatives. The big protests after October 7, there was still a conservative administration.
Time says North Korea founder was raised a Christian. I don't know much about him, but that doesn't strike me as...
It's so difficult to find a decent history of North Korea. I mean, there's the book by Michael Malice, but it's not clear what there is fiction and what is. It's a very difficult topic to study. Also with Cambodia, it's difficult to find good histories of Pol Pot.
All right, final question from Neo. Nikos, your take on Real Madrid next season under Mourinho?
Mourinho. There is not enough popcorn in the universe on what is about to happen. So here's the context, people. Mourinho is the biggest ego, the biggest showman in the history of football. Mourinho is like the Kardashians. You should have a camera following him 24/7. He was a brilliant coach, but his jobs, he gets fired. Now, Real Madrid has some of the most difficult characters to discipline. They have Vinicius, they have Mbappe. They had two players who were literally fist fighting. The one has still a scar, Valverde. So the owner of Real Madrid decided, in order to discipline these Gen Z spoiled brats, is to bring someone whose ego is even higher than their ego. So I think what should happen is there should be a Netflix, Amazon Prime camera following Real Madrid 24/7. It's
Yep.
going to be the show for the ages. I don't expect to see good football because we haven't seen good football from Mourinho for more than a decade, but it's going, again, the popcorn in the world is not enough. So I'm very, very excited to it's not even going to be a hate watch. It's going to be a joy watch. It's going to be so entertaining that whether you love or you hate Real Madrid, it's going to be a gift to humanity.
All right, guys, that is today's show. By the time we meet next time, we will know who's in the semifinals. So we will know who the 4 teams in the semifinals are. So we'll have an opportunity to talk about football more next show. And then, of course, the final show will either be before the finals or just after the finals. Either way, it'll be plenty of reason to have a conversation. All right, guys, have a great week. Nikos will be back on Sunday. I will be back tomorrow. And yeah, enjoy
Thank you very much.
enjoy the games today. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.